Story number 1. The Villisca Axe Murder House. Iowa, June 9th, 1912. The night no one escaped. The town that slept easy. Villisca, Iowa was the kind of town where nobody locked their doors. In the summer of 1912, it was a modest farming community of about 2,500 people, the sort of place where everyone knew their neighbors by name, where children ran barefoot through fields until supper, and where the biggest event of the week was Sunday church. Life moved slowly and predictably, governed by seasons and harvests and the rhythm of small-town America. June 9th, 1912 was a Sunday, and it had been a particularly good one. The Moore family had attended the annual Children's Day program at the Presbyterian Church that evening, a cheerful, musical celebration that drew much of the town together. Josiah Moore, 43, was a well-respected businessman who ran a successful farm implement store on the main square. His wife Sarah, 39, was warm and community-minded. Together they had 4 children: Herman, 11, Mary, 10, Arthur, 7, and little Paul, just 5 years old. That evening, the Moores had invited 2 friends of their daughter Mary to sleep over: Lena Stillinger, 12, and her younger sister Ina, 8. The girls' parents agreed without a second thought. This was Villisca. Nothing bad happened in Villisca. By 10 p.m., the house on 2nd Street had gone quiet. 8 people, 2 adults, 4 children, and 2 little guests, drifted off to sleep under the warm Iowa summer night. None of them would ever wake up. It was a neighbor, Mary Peckham, who first noticed something was wrong. On the morning of June 10th, she observed that the Moore house was unusually still. No smoke rising from the chimney. No sounds
of children. No movement. The animals hadn't been tended to. The chickens were still locked in their coop, unfed. The family's hired hand hadn't been let in either. She knocked. No answer. Growing uneasy, she contacted Josiah Moore's brother, Ross. He arrived with a key, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. The downstairs appeared undisturbed, almost eerily normal. But when Ross moved toward the bedrooms, the smell hit him first. Thick, metallic, and wrong in a way that made his stomach lurch before his eyes could even process what was ahead. He opened the door to the master bedroom. Josiah and Sarah Moore lay in their bed, unrecognizable. Their faces had been reduced to something that barely resembled human features. They had each been struck repeatedly, savagely, with the blunt side of an axe. The ceiling above their bed was sprayed with blood. Chunks of bone and tissue were embedded in the headboard. Ross staggered backward, then moved to the children's rooms. All 4 more children were in their beds, each one murdered in the same manner, struck while they slept, never given the chance to scream or run. Young Paul, just 5 years old, still lay curled in a sleeping position, as if he had simply never woken up.
In the downstairs guest room, Lena and Ina Stillinger lay dead as well. Lena's body showed signs of a struggle. She had likely been awake or partially awake when the killer entered. She bore defensive wounds. Her nightgown had been disturbed. 8 people, all killed in the same house, in a single night. The town of Villisca would never be the same. Within hours, the small town was overwhelmed. Word spread like fire through dry grass, and residents flooded the street outside the Moore home in shock and disbelief. By midday, hundreds of people, some estimates say over 1,000, had crowded near the property. And in a catastrophic failure that would doom the investigation from the start, law enforcement allowed many of them to walk through the crime scene. Footprints were destroyed. Evidence was contaminated. Curious townsfolk handled the axe, which had been found in the guest room. The scene, one of the most brutal in American history to that point, was compromised beyond repair before professional investigators had even arrived. The murder weapon was identified as Josiah Moore's own axe, taken from his barn. The killer had used it methodically and then left it behind. every mirror in the house had been covered with clothing. The ceilings throughout the home were covered in a strange pattern. Investigators concluded the killer had swung the axe so many times that he'd left gouge marks above each bed from the backswing. This suggested not frantic rage, but something more deliberate, practiced. Kerosene lamps had been burned down to empty, suggesting the killer remained in the house for some time, possibly while the family slept, before striking, or stayed after. A piece of bacon was found sitting inexplicably on the floor of one bedroom. A bowl of bloody water in another room suggested the killer had washed himself before leaving. He had locked the doors from the inside using the interior bolts and departed through the front door. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing, and they walked out of Villisca in the dark, without a trace. Over the years, investigators and amateur sleuths have pointed fingers at several figures, none of whom were ever
conclusively proven guilty. Frank Jones was the leading suspect for many years. He had been Josiah Moore's former employer, and Josiah had left Jones's company to open a competing implement business, allegedly stealing a valuable John Deere dealership in the process. Jones was financially devastated by the move and publicly furious. He had means, motive, and some argued connections that could have helped him escape justice. A U.S. senator at the time, Jones had influence and resources, but the evidence against him was circumstantial, and nothing stuck. Reverend George Kelly became the most dramatic suspect. A traveling minister with a history of violent obsessions, Kelly had been in Villisca the night of the murders and had attended the same church event the Moore family went to that evening. He was arrested in 1917, and he confessed twice in detail. He described entering the home, watching the family sleep, and carrying out the murders in a state he described as a kind of divine compulsion. He said God had told him to silence the children. But Kelly recanted almost immediately each time, claiming his confessions had been coerced. He was tried twice. The first trial ended in a hung jury, the second in acquittal. He walked free. Whether Kelly was a guilty man who escaped justice or an unstable man who falsely confessed to a crime he didn't commit remains one of the most debated questions in true crime history. Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the family, was a traveling serial killer active in the Midwest around the same time, convicted of axe murders in Missouri. Some researchers believe the Villisca killings were part of his spree, noting the similar method and timing. He was never charged in connection with Villisca, but the parallels are deeply unsettling. The murders shattered Villisca's identity. The quiet confidence of a town where everyone trusted everyone was obliterated overnight. Residents began locking their doors, some for the first time in their lives. Parents kept their children inside after dark. The sense of communal safety that had defined the town for generations simply evaporated. The Moore house sat empty for years, carrying its horror like a weight that no new owner could shake. Families who moved in reported sleepless nights, feelings of being watched, and an oppressive, suffocating dread that seemed to cling to the walls. Some left quickly. Others didn't stay long enough to unpack. The Stillinger family, who lost their 2 daughters in a house that wasn't even their home, grieved in a way that no closure could ever touch. The crime was never officially solved. No one was ever convicted. Over the following decades, the case was periodically reopened, re-examined, and theorized about. Investigative journalists, criminologists, and amateur detectives have pored over every detail. Books have been written, documentaries have been filmed, and still, nothing conclusive. The house still stands on East 2nd Street in Villisca. It has been preserved almost exactly as it appeared in 1912 and is now one of the most visited paranormal sites in the United States. Visitors who tour the property report a consistent set of experiences: an overwhelming sense of sadness in the children's rooms, cold spots that appear and disappear without explanation, the feeling of being followed from room to room, objects that move on their own, voices recorded on audio equipment during EVP sessions, whispers, sometimes what sounds like a child. Overnight stays are offered. Not everyone makes it through the night. In 2014, a man staying overnight in the house stabbed himself repeatedly in the head in what he later described as a sudden, uncontrollable impulse he couldn't explain. He survived,
but claimed he had no memory of doing it. Police investigated and found no evidence of any outside involvement. He had simply, inexplicably, attacked himself in the dark. Paranormal investigators have documented some of their most compelling evidence here. Whether you believe in such things or not, the house carries something with it. A gravity, an atmosphere that even confirmed skeptics have struggled to dismiss. Some places hold on to their tragedies. Some wounds in the earth don't close. And in Villisca, Iowa, on a quiet residential street that looks like every other quiet residential street in America, the doors of that small white house open every day for visitors who want to feel what it's like to stand where 8 people breathed their last. The killer walked in through the dark. He has never been found. The Villisca Axe Murder House is located at 508 East 2nd Street, Villisca, Iowa. Tours and overnight stays are available year-round. 8 people were murdered there on the night of June 9th and 10th, 1912. No one was ever convicted of their deaths.